sits on the chair by the door to my room, its bright colors muted by the darkness of the room. But I can see its features. Large, yellow eyes, a red, bulbous nose, and a grin showing too many teeth. Are they pointed, or is that only my imagination? I hate staring at it, but I dare not look away. You see, I'm sure it's just my imagination, but every time I glance away, it slides further and further off the chair. As it is now, the clown has almost fallen into the floor, its legs dangling just inches off the ground. So here I lay, sleepy, but I dare not close my eyes. Weary, but I dare not even blink. I lay and stare at the horrid clown and wait for morning to save me. Suddenly, I open my eyes. Oh no, I dozed off. How long was I out? Where's that clown? I sit up and look at the floor below the chair, but I can't find the damned clown. He could be anywhere. I'm too afraid to check under the bed, so I crawl to the end of my bed and lean over while keeping my hands away from the edge so I don't get grabbed. I glance back towards the chair and finally see the clown crumpled in a lump and wedged between the leg of the chair and the wall. Suddenly, something lands on the bed behind me, the spring sagging from the additional weight, and hisses in my ear. It's not the clown you should have worried about. In 1981, the United States experienced the Phantom Clown Scare. You won't find many details about the Phantom Clown Scare on Wikipedia or in textbooks. You're lucky if you can still find articles about it in your local library. The people who remember it whisper of the weird, terrible, and strange stories. They could still feel the repercussions throughout the next 20 years. My dad was 6 when the Phantom Clown Scare happened. He had been playing outside during recess at school when the first clown appeared. Dressed in a traditional white and red clown suit with a matching red nose, the clown did not pose a threat. In fact, he would make balloon animals for the children, tossing them over the fence, and watched as they played with them. Eventually, animal balloons turned into talking to some of the kids, oftentimes doing impressions of popular cartoon characters, Scooby-Doo and the Roadrunner. Laughter filled the playground when the clown was there. Joy was in the air. Kids looked forward to recess solely to see the clown and the tricks he had up his sleeve for the day. Eventually, the laughter came to an abrupt end when the clown began to lure kids into the forest adjacent to the school. Now it's all happening again in my hometown, Greenville, South Carolina. We lived a decent lifestyle. We were not poor, nor were we rich. We were somewhere in between. My parents were high school sweethearts who wanted to get out of their own crummy little town in Massachusetts and start their lives over in South Carolina. It was my dad's idea, and my mom followed along. Greenville wasn't all that bad. We had a small downtown area where stores ranged from boutiques to coffee shops, and one big franchise grocery store. When my parents had first moved here, it wasn't as booming with civilians as it is now. My dad opened up his own mechanic shop, which struggled for a few years, but according to our statements, it seems to be doing much better now. And my mom picked up a part-time job at the library. 16 years later, I was born. My name is Jake, by the way. Maybe I should have told you that early on. Anyways, after I was born, they waited to have my younger brother, who is now 6 years old, and his name is Daniel. It doesn't matter if you live under a rock or don't listen to the news. You've heard what's happening lately in Greenville County. This week, in an apartment complex called Fleetwood Manor, children began to complain about clowns standing near a forest, trying to lure them in with toys. candy, and money. An official letter went out to the residents of Fleetwood Manor and those living nearby in a 10-mile radius. Fear spiked the town. Children were no longer allowed to go out without supervision, and curfew was effective immediately. My mother was hysterical when she found out about it on the news. Fortunately, we don't live in Fleetwood Manor. We lived a couple of streets down in the newer subdivisions that face the middle of the forest. 3 days ago, Daniel turned 6. All he wanted for his birthday was a clown who could make a balloon animal like the clown at Terry Dowell's birthday did. My parents immediately objected to the idea, making a whole ordeal out of it. My mom had walked into the den, immediately occupying herself with a book I know she had read from cover to cover 4 times. My dad kept his head down as he scrubbed the dishes, claiming he would hear no more of this nonsense. It was one thing not to like clowns. It was a common thing, but the distaste my parents exhibited was on a whole new level. When my dad came into my room later that night to check up on me, I asked him about what happened earlier that day. I told him it was probably some college kids pulling a prank before going back to school, or even a promotional stunt for Stephen King's remake of the movie It. I remember my dad looked at me like I was completely out of line. At first, he didn't want to talk about it, but with lots of convincing, and me promising not to repeat the story to Daniel, he reluctantly told me the story. So here it is, in his own words.
When I was around Daniel's age, life was very different in the 80s. Your grandparents raised me in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, in a similar subdivision like the one you live in now. We would ride our bikes from dusk till dawn. We'd stay out late and play on the playground, and we would ride all over town fearlessly. Kids didn't go missing back then. Kids were not targets for pedophiles and killers, do you follow me? Okay, good. In May, things changed. Our innocence was ripped from our hands because of those damned clowns. There was the one clown that would stand outside my school, befriending us kids. At first, we thought he was harmless. He would bring us treats and make animal balloons. Then, once he gained our trust, he would show us things that no child should see. He would threaten to do things to us if we told an adult. Then, Tommy O'Donnell went missing. Us kids knew what happened. The clown had taken him. The whole town was put under curfew, and there were police all over the streets, just like now. Eventually, kids started speaking up about the clown. What my friends and I did next, right after Tommy was reported missing, haunts me to this day. We biked near the school, where there was a connecting forest. We went into the forest to search for Tommy. What we found instead? Jake, I don't want to scare you. There was a clown. His red lipstick was smeared across his face in a sinister grin. We could see his real teeth. They were sharp and yellow. His eyes were such a light hazel they almost gleamed yellow in the moonlight. He was standing near a small fire, and around him, more clowns like the one near our school. Their clothes were tattered and dirty, their makeup smeared and melted through their masks. Their red noses were thrown into the fire along with their white gloves. Their fingernails were coated in dirt, chewed up to the skin, the cuticles bloody. The clowns were no longer welcoming, they were terrifying. We spotted Tommy, who was drugged and barely moving. My friend Quan grew up in a family of martial arts fighters, and he ran towards one of the clowns while I was hiding in the bushes. He went straight for one of the clowns, who had his back turned to us, and jumped on their back. He wanted to rip off the mask he was wearing, but the clown kept screaming. The other clowns were pulling Quan off the clown's back, but that little bugger would not let go. He had the grip of a snake. I watched as he tried to rip off the mask, but he couldn't. It was sewn on his face. Every pull Quan did pulled all the strings off his mask, which was the clown's own skin. Have you ever seen muscles under skin, son? The pink and red muscles had an elasticity which made it convenient to use as a string. And the screams, oh God, the screams were deafening. I thought it would never end. I watched as they finally got Quan to the ground, drugging him too. I couldn't run or move, they would catch me. So I stayed crouched and hidden behind the bushes and watched what they did to Quan. Slowly, they began to cut skin off his bones, first starting with the arms, legs, and finally moving towards the face. The worst part was that Quan was beginning to come to, and he could feel everything. They began to sew pieces together, making another mask, and sewed it onto Tommy's face, making him unrecognizable. After that, they began to pick at what was left of his body, roasting the skin over the fire like marshmallows, popping parts of the skin in their mouth, chewing the bones, eating Quan until there was nothing left. This is what they did. They were building a clown cult or something, calling themselves the Phantom Clowns. I waited behind that bush for hours on end before they finally left. I can't remember how or when they left. It was as if they disappeared into thin air. Finally, when morning came, I ran to the police. They went back to the place in the forest, but there was nothing. No body, no skin pieces, no bones. It was as if the clowns weren't even there. There were no more missing kids after that night. Curfew was lifted, and Brookline went back to how it was before. A couple of months later in Kansas, there was news about a group of clowns luring children in through the use of treats and candies. Children went missing. The police could not find a trace. For years there was nothing, as if the clowns had stopped hunting children. Rumor has it, if there is a news outbreak of clowns luring children in, the only way to get rid of them, and for them to move to the next town, is to sacrifice one of your own children of the town.
I watched as my dad wiped a tear from his eye. I had only seen him cry once before, and that was at Grandma's funeral. He let out a deep sigh and closed his eyes. "Do you think it's happening again?" I asked. My father looked at me, the emotion drained from his face. "Pray tonight, my son." He got up and walked towards my bedroom door, his finger hovering over the light switch. I'll never know what was going through my dad's mind that night. The way he looked at me is like I was a stranger in my own body. When I had finally fallen asleep, I dreamt of cannibalistic clowns. Go figure. Thanks, Dad. I had jolted awake. Sweat was pooling down my back and my hair was soaking wet. I slowed down my breathing, and that's when I heard it. Whispering. It was whispers between my dad and my younger brother, Daniel. It sounded like my dad was trying to calm him down. Daniel was known to have night terrors. I had cursed my dad silently for telling such a scary story while Daniel was up. I was sure he must have crept to my room and listened, thus having some nightmares as of myself, and triggered his night terrors. After a couple of minutes, silence filled the house once more. I was finally drifting back off into sleep when I heard the front door close. I opened my eyes and sat back up, listened for any footsteps. There was none. Nobody was breaking into our house. I slipped out from under my covers, my feet touching the cold hardwood floor. I walked towards the window and peered out into the darkness that cloaked the town. The small street light was flickering on and off, ready to give out. Under the street light, I could make out two figures, one taller man and a small child. It took me a minute to realize that the tall man and the child were my dad and Daniel. I watched as they held hands and walked towards the edge of the forest. I pounded on the window, shouting, "No! No! What are you doing? Come back, Dad! Daniel!" I watched in horror as my dad stopped at the edge of the forest, pausing before looking down at Daniel. Daniel looked up at him. I could imagine the confusion in his eyes as he obeyed my dad's wishes. My dad knelt down to kiss Daniel on the forehead before giving him a gentle nudge to walk forward towards. That was the night I lost my brother. He was officially reported missing after 48 hours. When police questioned my parents, my dad claimed to have no recollection of that night. But I know better. I had watched as my dad sacrificed his own son to the clowns to rid them from his town.
Hi guys, Listen to Me Speak here. I just want to say thank you for watching my videos and listening to the story. Follow the link in the description, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and feel free to tell me what you think.
If you like what I'm doing, then remember to comment, like, and subscribe. It means a lot when you guys comment on my videos, because I'm just getting started doing this, and I appreciate all the people that have supported me and given me tips and tricks. And shout out to Creeperoni and Southern Cannibal, because they both kind of told me what to do to get started. Thanks, guys.